Hello, I'm BrigantiaBlackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Saturday and welcome to this week's Loki video. If you've been following along, you know that over the past couple of weeks we've been taking a closer look at some of Loki's children, and this week we're going to be focusing on Fenrir, who is arguably the most famous wolf in all of Norse mythology. He is the one who is destined to devour Odin at Ragnarok and then be killed by Vidar, who is one of Odin's sons. His parents are, of course, Loki and Angrboda. His full siblings were Jormungandr, the world serpent, and the goddess Hel, who rules over Helheim. His half-siblings are Sleipnir, of the horse incident, and then Narvi and Vali, whose mother is Sigyn. While he was still quite young, Fenrir was taken from his parents just as his other full siblings were, and then he went into the gods' care, and they kept him under very close watch until his growth and his size just became rather alarming to them. Now, if Fenrir's brother Jormungandr represents the broken or the stunted mind, then I think Fenrir represents a broken heart and the fury of emotion that can be unleashed if that heart is never mended. And of course, this brings us to the betrayal. Now, unlike Jormungandr, who was just tossed into the sea in hopes that he drowned, or Hel, who was banished to the world of the dead just to stay out of sight, Fenrir seemingly had more comfortable circumstances, at least on the surface. He was being raised by the gods on Asgard, with the god Tyr in particular taking an interest in him. And as I've mentioned in other video series, I do believe that their bond was genuine. And it was all going relatively well until Fenrir grew to be of such a size that the gods feared they wouldn't be able to contain him. So they decided that chaining him up was going to be the answer. So the fetters were put on Fenrir, and the gods persuaded him that it was just a game to test his strength. And the first two tries, Fenrir was able to break through the bonds quite easily. But the third attempt involved a fetter that was crafted by the dwarves. And Fenrir was understandably suspicious because this had been going on and, things just weren't feeling right because, of course, things were not being presented to him in an honest way. So he refused to cooperate with this particular fetter unless one of the gods put his arm in his mouth as a gesture of good faith. And then it was Tyr who did this. Fenrir trusted him, and then Fenrir was bound, and Tyr lost his hand for it. And I think this just shattered Fenrir. I rather suspect that he looked up to Tyr as a surrogate father figure, at least in Loki's absence. And certainly he trusted Tyr. He had had more to do with him than the rest of the gods had. So to have that relationship betrayed so thoroughly must have been soul-crushing. And then after the binding, Fenrir was chained to a large rock, and a sword was placed in his mouth to keep his jaws open. He howled endlessly, as you might imagine, and drool was running from his mouth, and it went to the point that it actually created a river that was then named Expectation. And of course, this is in reference to his eventual jailbreak and his revenge at Ragnarok. And this brings us to the culmination of his fate. According to one version of the tale, Jormungandr will shake the world, and that will result in the boulder that Fenrir is tied to just shattering, and it's from that point that Fenrir will be able to free himself. Then after that, the story goes on that Fenrir will have his lower jaw against the ground, his upper jaw against the sky, and he will just devour everything in his path. Then he'll do battle with Odin, who ultimately kill him, and then Fenrir will be killed by Vidar in revenge. There's a great deal of tragedy in Fenrir's mythology. After his binding, he was isolated, ignored and feared in equal measure. He had no comfort, no relief, no hope. Now, any sentient being can live without a lot of things, but to be deprived of hope, that's tantamount to being denied air. And the same can be said of love. Even if we only have one person who truly cares for us, that can be enough to keep us from going crazy, even under the most difficult of circumstances. But without that anchor, well, things get pretty dicey. And those who are brokenhearted, if they do become hopeless from it, they can become extremely destructive, and all the more so if that grievance was absolutely justified. Fenrir's most extreme deeds were a consequence of all the events that led up to Ragnarok, and he doesn't strike me as a being that was malevolent from the word go. It had to be constructed through external forces and a lack of healing combined, and that's why things went the way that it did. So I think there's a great lesson in this about the dangers of of going through heartbreak and not allowing ourselves to heal, or how we do need to form meaningful and genuine connections with other people, even after we experience betrayal at the hands of others. It's a terrifying thing to think of, but the worst of who we are will come out if we are completely isolated and we aren't grounded, if we aren't connected to anyone else. So there's a lot to really unpack there. But that's what I have for today. Let me know your thoughts and impressions in the comment section below, or come visit us on Blackbird's Brew on Discord. There's a link to join in the description box below, and we would be very happy to have you. So that'll do it for today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.